I know it's your show, but...
You can't be serious, man. You cannot be serious!
Now, here's part 2 of the podcast, Sam, Mike and Don, You Cannot Be Serious. Now, the man I'm about to introduce, well, he's an enigma, I think, because
And a kid, no?
What's that, Mick?
Enigma, Mick, you idiot.
You idiot. He loves
He's an
it.
enigma. He is possibly the Jekyll and Hyde of modern-day sport, because most of his professional life in sport, being the CEO of or the president of one of the marquee sporting clubs in Australia.
St Kilda, one of the marquee sporting clubs, is it?
The 18 football clubs, the 18 AFL clubs are the marquee clubs of Australian sport, no matter how much you want to say that's not right, they are. The AFL is the top sporting brand.
Come on, do the intro.
So this man probably lived his life through a completely different prism if you know his history, and he is Rodney Butters. He was the CEO or the president of the St Kilda Football Club. He is, by well documented, a reformed drug addict and alcoholic, and he is joined us today to speak about all things football, life, and anything in between. Mick.
Welcome, Rod.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming on.
Great pleasure.
Now, I know this is not the most important, but I just can't go. Did you, in fact, blow $90 million in about 3 years?
Oh, no, 10 years.
Oh, 10,
I
was
mean,
it?
let's be fair.
On drugs?
Okay.
Oh, well, not that much. Most of it was on, women, racehorses, and I raced at the West.
90
Wasted
million.
the rest. Look, I don't know the exact number. I really don't. But it
You
was
told me 90.
Yeah, it was in that order. Yes.
But you have got a bit of change left.
Not really. No, I'm rebuilding, Don.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
I know where you blew half of that.
Yeah, so do I.
I went to your second wedding in Sydney, a wedding that lasted about 6 weeks.
4 months, please.
4 months. And I remember, I'll never forget this, you two. I was a guest at the wedding. Rod married Susie McLean.
I did.
What was the place in
You've
Sydney?
done your research.
No, I was there.
Yeah, I know.
What was the place in Sydney?
Oh, the Ivy, I think.
Right.
Yeah.
So I remember seeing you the morning after the reception, which was a very, very fine show.
Ugly.
And I said to you, geez, there was nothing that we were wanting last night, Rodney. I said, this wedding must have just cost you nearly $100,000. To which you said, I've just been in and paid the grog bill. It was $96,000.
Yeah, they rang me in the morning.
$96,000 on grog for one night.
I was in bed at 10 o'clock and they said, would you please come down and pay the grog bill? And I said, no, I'm in bed. I'm like, I'm a comatose. I can't move. And they said, well, we're a bit anxious. And I said, you're anxious. How do you reckon I feel? But I went down and paid it. Yeah, it was a big ticket.
So what about the Bolivian booger sugar? Was that in ample
I'll
supply?
tell you a bit of a funny story, Sam, because it was humid that night.
Humid?
Yeah.
We all know about the Bolivian mugga booger. Is that what you call it?
Booger sugar,
Booger
stuff
sugar.
you put up the hoover.
Anyway,
when you say we all know about it, not a hell of a lot about
I'm
it.
assuming. It sort of went gluey like clag.
Yeah.
So I popped it in the microwave and went to work and racked up, as we say in the trade, and prepared to partake. And my flippin' mother-in-law walked in on me, and
She ever sniffed?
oh God,
No.
no, she was a very sort of prudish Italian woman, and she said, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm making scones." That's all I can think of. But they were the old days. I mean, I don't do that anymore.
No, okay.
Well, give us a bit of background.
He's been 11 years clean, Don,
Yes.
from
Everything.
grog and hard
Sex,
drugs, right?
drugs, alcohol,
No,
gambling.
not the middle one.
at an addictive level. Addictive level. See, I went to my first AA meeting thinking I was an alcoholic. Indeed, I was. And it took me a long time to work that out. And I walked out an hour later. 1 hour later, I walked out a sex addict, a drug addict, an alcoholic, and a gambler. And I thought, shit, I've got a job in front of me here.
But you're still going to AA, aren't you?
Absolutely.
Why?
I love it. It's just a wonderful place. It's where I go to bed every night as a recovered alcoholic and have done for a decade. And I wake up and I have the mind of an alcoholic. So in the morning, it's at me.
Even 11 years on.
Oh, yeah, but not necessarily to have a drink. It's just telling me stuff that I don't need to partake in. So I find the recovery programs very helpful just to get into cruise control.
So you got an addictive personality.
Oh, just a bit. Yeah.
What, in other things as
Yes,
well?
everything.
Or a lot of things?
Everything. See, Don, my brain and your brain, and I'm assuming you're not an alcoholic, and I'll make that assumption, very different. And that is that if I take a drink, my switch flicks on, and I crave and crave and crave. Whereas you take a drink, and after 2 or 3 drinks, your switch flicks off. And that's the difference. It's a biological issue. It's according to the World Health Organization, a disease, and I go with that. According to the American Society of Psychiatrists, it's a disease. My body's a little bit different to yours. When I have one of something, my body screams at me for more.
So you're the living example of one drink is one too many and 100's not enough.
100%.
So Rod, you were the president of the St Kilda Football Club from 2001 to 2007, and I would venture to say that if you were on drugs and drinking during that period, you made not one clinical decision based on the best interests of St Kilda or the players or the coaches or the staff, and you managed to pull that off for 7 years.
Yes.
I'm not going to say regret. Did you ever think of apologising to anyone for the fact
absolutely.
that you... have you ever publicly apologised to...
Absolutely, I have, yes.
Have you?
Now, there's a couple of things there, Sam. A very emotional topic. Addiction is a very emotional topic because when you're in...
How did you become addicted?
Well, I explained that earlier. I was born an addict.
He's an addictive personality.
Yeah.
Whatever he does, he's...
I was born an addict, Sam.
Were you?
Yeah. I have an addictive personality. So my wiring is a little different potentially to your wiring, and that is once I take one of something, my wiring goes into haywire and I want more. That's addiction.
I don't want to interrupt you, but you
Well, you
are
just
on...
did.
No, but because I want you to...
Yeah. I want to go back to answer your question.
Thank you.
Yeah.
But you, on the record, are saying you never saw or took drugs until you went to St Kilda. That's what you're on record as saying.
As a 15-year-old, I tried a bit of dope, marijuana. Who didn't?
No, you said
but it wasn't.
Never took drugs until I went
It wasn't
to St Kilda.
until I got involved in the industry.
What industry?
Football.
What, as an administrator?
Yeah. Well, I wasn't much good as a player, but I was a kid then. No, later years.
So that by inference, Rod, you're saying that you got involved in drugs as an administrator because other people were on them. So it's pretty rife.
No, that's a bit of a simplistic...
I know, it's a question.
No, it's a good question.
Yeah,
no,
and I'm happy to answer it. I think it's just environment. You know, I got involved.
So other people were doing it at St Kilda at the same time?
I can't talk about St Kilda, I really can't. But broadly...
What do you mean?
No, you can't.
No, hang on. Broadly, the industry, it was plentiful. Put it that way.
What, in
the AFL industry
or VFL football?
Absolutely.
Back then,
Yes.
administrative-wise.
Now, I can't... It's not fair of me...
No, I understand
No, hang
that.
on. To point the finger at club-level administration. When I say the industry, I'm talking about the broader, the bigger, wider industry. So
Players?
that includes... Of course players are using... My God.
Were they? No, they might
Of
be.
course they were. I never saw a single St Kilda player use, and I was unaware of any particular player using. I was very conscious that there were, discussions going on about different players at different clubs having, habits and nicking off overseas and using. But hey, I mean, really, that's what happens in society.
But isn't it funny that now we've got administrations worried about the drug habits of their players, and when you were there, it was players worrying about the drug habits of the administration?
Well, no, I think the players were blinded to it. I think the players were quite blinded
Actually,
to
it
it.
takes me back, Dale Lewis. Do you remember when Dale Lewis retired at Sydney and he was castigated?
That's right. 50%
saying that
he
it was
said.
kind of rife
I
in
think he's
AFL.
higher than that.
Yeah, he
Beg your
said
pardon?
70.
I think he said... I think he loosely said, I reckon about 75% of players have tried it.
Oh, no,
And he-
on it.
And he was vilified for that.
He was vilified.
He was.
Exactly right. And he was
And
right on the
he
money.
spoke the truth.
Yes.
He spoke the truth.
Can I ask you a bit about your background
Yeah,
first?
sure.
Because it fascinates me. You come from what, Sandringham?
Black Rock boy.
Okay. Now, when you rocked up to training as a youngster, you're a pro runner.
Yes, I was.
Very quick. You had overalls and whatever else. So what was your job? What was your job as a youngster?
Bricky's labourer.
A bricky's labour. So when did you make that transition, and how did you make that transition into recruitment and whatever else?
Oh, okay. So I was in the social club one night, pissed as a cricket, and Peter McKay approached me. I had a beard down to here and a hair down my back, and he said, I reckon you could sell. Well, I was actually a really super shy kid. And I said, well, okay, I'll give that a go. So I went out and bought a brown corduroy suit looked hideous. Something you might get around in, Don, in those days. A bit flary. And I started selling carbon paper. Now, our younger listeners won't know what carbon paper is, but look it up, Google it. And then I love sales. I love people. I love transactions. I love business. And it was like I'd found my Mecca, And I got into business and started my first company at a very young age. And
selling?
Sales, oh yeah. So in IT, in recruitment, in professional services, in whatnot. And, just went from there. And, I had a lot of good fortune. I built some pretty large businesses. Sold my first company when I was about 37 or 38 for a lot of money. And I didn't have the emotional maturity to cope with it.
What's a lot of money?
A lot of money. That sale was 60 million.
60 million.
Another one at 80 and another one at 100.
All businesses that you owned?
Started, yeah.
So does that give you a qualification to go onto a football board? Did you get acceptance because you made money?
Oh, look, I haven't never thought about that. I think you have an acumen, you can read a balance sheet, you understand cause and effect, you understand the purpose. One of the nice things about working in AFL, the business, the purpose is really simple. We're there to win a flag. I mean,
I just want to question some of your decisions along that way.
No doubt, Sam. No doubt, Don.
Like the Malcolm Blight thing.
Yeah.
Now you paid him what, $1 million odd? You had to con him to really.
I wouldn't use the word con.
Well, you really had to sell him then.
Well, sell, yeah.
Yeah, and he put a lot of provisions in there.
No, not really.
And you paid him a lot of money.
We paid him $1 million over 2.
Yes.
$1 million over 2?
2 years.
Oh, I see. The popular view is it was $1 million for 1.
That's right. $1 million over 2.
So when you sacked him, did you pay him?
Well, he'd already been paid.
He'd already been paid.
Yeah, we paid him up front.
You paid him $1 million bucks.
You never got your money back, in other words.
We didn't get our money back, but our membership sales went through the roof, so it was a 0-all draw. It was fine. From a pure commercial perspective.
So why did you sack him?
I just thought Malcolm didn't have his heart in it. I thought, looking back now, I think Malcolm to me was one of the last of the great intuitive coaches. He coached intuitively. And at about the time I got, back involved in AFL as an administrator, the concept of data science and data-driven decisions, and it's prevalent now. I mean, you look at the Richmond coaches box, I think there were 15 blokes with PCs banging, do you remember that photograph we saw last year? So it's all about the data, and that was the progression from the late 90s into the noughties. It became about the data, and I don't think that was his strength.
So did Malcolm only turn up a couple of times a week to training?
Oh no, he was there more often than that. But
living in Palm.
No, he was living in Melbourne, but he spent a lot of time in the state.
So in the end, you gave him an offer he couldn't refuse. He went for the money predominantly.
Well, you'd have to talk to Malcolm.
I think you gave him $2 million.
$1 million.
$1 million for 2.
1 over 2.
Oh, okay. So pardon me. So
but
it's a hell of a lot of money then.
It is a hell of a lot of money, but you know yourself, everyone in this room knows that competitive people, when they get a sniff and an opportunity, we've seen boxers get back in the ring when they shouldn't get back in the ring. So the point is that, yes, we did a sell job. Absolutely we did. Unashamedly we did. We had a lot to sell. We were on a mission. And Malcolm got the sniff.
Would it be fair to say that under your tutelage as president of St Kilda, you held them back significantly from ever having a chance of being successful and winning their second or third grand final?
Second.
Yes, I know that, but if you want...
A subsequent, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
You held back through the decisions you made from being on the gear and not thinking rationally.
Look, I think that's a horribly naive statement.
Right,
and I'll tell you why.
Yep.
I know prime ministers, I know surgeons, yes. I know politicians, I know judges, I know a bunch of highly functioning addicts and alcoholics. Point 1. Point 2.
That is true.
Point 2. It was not the Rod Butters show. I had a very competent, capable board. In fact, I think we had the most competent, capable board at the time across, with guys like Glenn Casey, Mark Kellett, Ray King, Andy Bassett. And if you think it was the Rod Butters show, then that is horribly naive. Because that's not how good boards work.
And they ran third twice, Sammy.
well-
so I mean that's not all that far away if you get to the preliminary
That
final.
was my point.
Can I go back?
My
Would
point
you run
was-
your business the same?
Exactly that.
You know, with the deal you did with Malcolm Blythe.
Yes.
Would you run your business in the same way?
Oh, God, no.
Well, why did you do it?
Because I was a young punk. I was on a mission. I was bulletproof. I was 35. I was emotionally immature. I just sold my business for a fortune. I thought I was King Kong, and I behaved that way. And it ultimately brought about my demise on a bunch of fronts, personally, from a mental health perspective. I lost the Saints gig, which I cherished, and I went through a period of darkness. I had to grow up, and I think I did.
Did you sack Tim Watson?
No.
No. So Watson had
Tim's
gone. Resigned,
Yeah.
and then you appointed Malcolm.
That's right.
So you've had some big moves. You've appointed Malcolm, you sacked Malcolm, you appointed Grant Thomas, and you sacked him.
Correct.
And Tomo and you were seen to be inseparable
Yes.
for 5 or 6 years.
Correct.
And now you don't talk to each other.
Well, I try. He's uncomfortable. He won't.
Now,
Engage.
is this over the fact that he lost the job or that there was a monetary...
You'd have to ask Grant.
No, but you know.
No, I don't. I can't. I'm not in Grant's head.
There's only two people in this discussion.
Yeah, and I'm speaking from my perspective.
Yeah.
And my perspective was that I thought Grant did a lovely job, a good job for the first, 3 or 4 years. And then something happened, and I've witnessed this across the industry, as we all have. Coaches go through as Tim Watson said to me once, he said, Rod, coaching has taken me to a place that men should not go. It's a dark place. Mm-hmm. And I've seen it with many, 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 many coaches. I think it's fair to say Ross Lyon, at the end of his Fremantle period, actually referred to that comment and said, so there's only a handful of blokes that have done the more than 7 or 8 years and go on, the Malthouses and Sheedies and so on. So I'm just making the point that, I think it was a self-imposed enormous pressure that means that there's an element of dysfunction.
Okay, so let me give you these figures.
Yeah.
In the last 3 years of Thomas's tenure, you won 46 games and lost 26. You ran third, and eighth, and you were going to sack him in that third year, even if he'd played in the grand final, correct?
There was a discussion at the board, and I remember it well, mid-year, and a lot of directors felt that his time was up.
Is that because he was a dominant personality and maybe the board were a little bit fearful that he could mount a challenge if you didn't get in first?
Oh, God, no. No. There's no coaches mounting challenges. No, I think my reflection on Grant is that his greatest strength was his resilience, his determination, his pig-headedness, his drive, but it was also his greatest weakness. And we see that a lot in people.
My research shows me
Yes.
that in the years 2004, 5 and 6, St Kilda won more games than any other AFL club playing in that period of time. How would you say he lost his focus or he lost his mojo or whatever you said about him
Well, I
not
think, fair question.
capable?
I think that a lot of credit goes to Brian Waldron in the early days of some masterful trading and drafting and put that list together. So we were expected to perform like that. That was no accident. We put a lot of time and effort, and some people that are a whole lot smarter than me put a lot of time and effort. We traded out Everett, we traded out Hall, we traded out the Wakeland brothers, we traded out a lot of quality people and players, and we bought in the likes of Riewoldt, Kaczynski, Ball Clark, Nelson. We built a list that I think was the envy of the AFL. So having won 47 out of X, I'd bloody well hope so. But that's not the point. The point is this. The point is that when you're running an organisation, it needs to be functional. And it needs to be functional across the entire organisation. And I think the Tigers today are the epitome of that example today. And we were falling short in a number of areas. And so I'm not going to sit here. You've got to remember one thing. I was his boss. And Tomo, funny bloke, great bloke, got a lot of time for him, but he doesn't really like authority. Doesn't really enjoy it. Now, that's just not with respect to me or the St Kilda board. We're all very familiar with his attitudes toward umpires, the AFL, the commission, the executive, etc. If you've got a badge, he don't like you. So from a broader function, we weren't functioning, and that's why I felt we weren't, going further, and that's why we appointed Ross, and we did go further.
But I asked you before, and I'm not sure you answered. You've run third, and then ultimately eighth. But I'm sure you have said that in that year that you ran eighth, Tomo would have been moved on even had you played in the grand final.
Mike, that was the feeling in the board. That was the feeling. That I can say that 8 good people, smart people, and an entire executive had that view. Yes.
And was the debt
No.
between Butters and Thomas?
No.
Did that influence your thinking at
Not
all?
one iota.
Was it $1 million?
In that order.
Well, it was reported in the Sydney Herald Sun, May 2007, you both went to court.
No, we had mediation.
You had mediation, but it was reported you were going to court.
There was never any court action. We got together and
Did you get your money?
look, it's subject to confidentiality, so I really can't.
You resolved the situation.
We resolved the situation quite amicably.
You didn't.
So
This
was part of you, not the football club, but you financing his wage or salary.
No, the club financed his wage and salary.
So this is separate altogether.
You loaned him some money.
I loaned. Yeah. I don't think that's a secret.
You said it was settled amicably. That's not true. You don't talk to
we
each
didn't
other.
go to court. We didn't go to court. We didn't.
Wasn't amicable.
I didn't end up with a black eye. He didn't end up with a black
resolved
eye.
the
We
situation.
resolved it in a professional and
Really?
and reasonable manner.
And he won't speak to you since.
But look, understand, I led a
But if you
board.
let
Now,
a
hang on,
bloke-
Donny, I just wanted to
Yeah, go
I led a board that made the ultimate decision on his coaching career. I totally respect and understand and appreciate that he's annoyed with me and he doesn't want to talk to me. I get that.
But I can't understand the other side. You got a business deal. You loan a guy $1 million. You've got to get that back.
Look, Don.
It's a loan.
Don,
Why would you?
I loaned him an
compromise?
amount of money. We came to an agreement. You move on and get on with life.
So you did money in the deal, obviously.
Look, I've done money. I've done dough.
So really, the amount of money was insignificant as far as your fortune was concerned.
Well,
They resolved
no.
the
I
situation.
don't think it's a case of the amount of money was insignificant as far as it's just that there's some things in life I value and there's some things in life I don't. And I don't particularly value,
money.
well, to the point of wanting to
Isn't there a principle
to the point of
involved?
getting upset about it.
Isn't there a principle involved?
Look, I think there is. Yeah, there's a principle. There's also a bigger principle.
What?
It's called peace of mind. It's called. Shit happens. Get on with it. Do you know they say in the material, the recovery material that I read, that one of the greatest causes of an alcoholic or an addict's using or drinking is resentment. So if you want to go through life, and I don't, with resentments, then life is an awfully long, arduous, dark battle because you won't win that
Well,
one.
I must be going through it.
Where'd you get the drugs?
From the drug shop.
No, with the,
From the drug shop, Sam. Don't be silly.
from the drug shop. So you had a supplier,
No, not really. It was
Well,
just,
but
it was in
maybe-
a social circle. And
but you must get it from. You must have a reasonable supplier if you spent the best part of 90
no.
million.
Let's put things into perspective.
Ah, that's good. I'm glad we're doing that.
Yeah.
Thank
Let's
you.
put things into perspective. I think the
drug
the
shop.
big ticket, the number that I lost was lost on business deals, a couple of divorces, a bunch of lawyers, etc. like that. I think the amount I spent on booze, apart from that particular the wedding, it was minuscule.
Did you get depressed?
Yeah, very. Oh, yeah, suicidal.
Clinical depression?
Suicidal. Oh, yes. Suicidal. And that's what got me into recovery.
You just felt lost.
Oh, worse than lost. I was distraught. I'd made a fatal mistake of when in the gig at the Saints, when I was the press, I had allowed that role to become my identity. And when that was taken from me, then I didn't have an identity. So when you get lost like that, you want to feel different. And the easiest way to feel different or better is to have a drink or a drug. And that's what I did. And so that was what we would describe in the trade as the pre-contemplative stage, the end, when you're getting dark and you're using drugs and alcohol to feel better, because it doesn't work, but it works for a while. And so at the end of that period, which was probably a 4 or 5 year period, at the end of that, I stood on the balcony not far from here in South Bank, and I willed myself to jump from the 26th floor, and I didn't have the guts. I didn't have what it took. And I went to a show recently with Osho Ginsberg, and Osho shared his experience. And he said at that moment, because we often, struggle to understand how can a person take their own life.
Okay,
let me just finish the point,
No,
Sam.
I want you to.
How can a person take their own life? It's the ultimate act of sacrifice, And he said he got to the point where there was an alluring whisper saying, come, come, come. It's okay.
Did you experience that?
No. My children's sort of images flashed into my eyes and my mind. I went back inside and I thought to myself, I'm in deep shit here. I don't have the courage to jump. I can't keep living the way I'm living. This is hell on earth. What the hell am I going to do?
With the experience of this, did you ever think, or did you reach out to Danny Frawley if you knew?
Yes,
Did you reach out to him?
Look, I don't want to really.
No,
I
fair
do not
enough.
want to spend time on that issue because it's too sad,
It is.
and it's another example of where we in society, I think need to take a much more significant position on mental health and men's mental health and children's mental health.
You didn't have mental health problems?
Oh, but I was a basket full of mental health problems.
Okay, so to err is human, but you were able to go through the other side and actually make a success of your adversity.
I got lucky.
Well,
I got lucky.
The harder you try, the luckier.
Yeah, well,
you
that's
get.
right. I remember that night in the hotel in my unit in South Bank, and I went back inside and I thought, what am I going to do? I can't jump. I don't have the guts to jump. I can't keep living like this. I can't keep doing it. And I cried like a kid, and I swore black and blue I was not going to drink again, and I was pissed by lunchtime the next day. So it was just dark, and then I prayed like I don't pray, and I prayed to who I have no idea, and I met a guy called David. Just coincidentally,
How did you meet him?
I met him through a friend, and he was a recovering heroin addict, and he said, "It's okay, it's okay," and I said, "But this and that, my life, and like holy," he said, "It's okay." It's exactly where I was at 10 years ago. And he had an energy about him. He had, like a beaming smile. I said, then what did you do? Because I'm in trouble. He said, well, if you want what I got, you got to do what I do. And that's just recovery.
Are you a born-again Christian?
No. Well, no, God, no.
Well, you said you prayed...
Well, don't make the assumption I prayed to your Christian God. I mean, there's millions of them. There's millions of gods.
Who did you pray to?
I don't know.
You're a lapsed Catholic, aren't you?
A higher
Very
being.
lapsed.
Yeah.
Something bigger than me.
Yes.
Because
That'd be God, probably.
but which God? You want to nominate one? I'll give you $1 million to pick from.
Give us a couple.
Well, the Greek gods. There's 50, a couple hundred of them.
Allah.
That one.
Yeah.
Buddha.
All right. Fair enough. Yeah.
So I don't know.
Do you want to go on this?
Well, are you in a good place now?
Oh, I love life. I'm blessed.
You always say that we talk quite regularly.
Yes.
And I think most of the time I believe that it's fair income, that it's you.
Yeah.
But occasionally I wonder whether that's a facade.
No, look, I'll tell you, Mike, if I'm going shit house, I'll tell you. I promise you, I'll tell you. Because I can't be bothered with the pretense. And if I'm having a bad day, I'll tell you. But, I do a lot of things around my mental health. I do a lot of things to remain in a nice place. I meditate every morning and most nights. And I think I've come to put material things into a perspective that I'm very relaxed about. One of the keys to recovery, one of the absolute keys, in fact, it's step 12 of the 12 steps. You may have heard of the 12 steps, is having had a spiritual experience as a result of these steps, this work we've done, we continue to...
God again.
Well, which God?
No, spiritual, different.
Spiritual, that's right.
John.
Good point, Don. We basically then try and help others. Now, that might be others to get into recovery or a little old lady crossing the road, but we get out of our own self a bit and just try and help some others. And it's a beautiful way to live.
Can we get off this heavy subject?
Sure, of course.
Why?
Because I want to. It's
Well,
heavy.
it's-
It's
no, it's
depressing.
It's enthralling.
Well, that's...
Can I just go back, though? Can I just go back to a point Sam made?
Don't you appreciate someone
I
who's
appreciate
been
all of
probably
this.
to the bottom of the...
Yeah, but you don't want to stay there.
But I want to go somewhere else.
Yeah.
Well, this is your circuit stories.
Well, no, this man thinks differently and a little bit in depth. Now, you grow up in Sandringham. Obviously, you were St Kilda supporter.
Tigers, actually.
Oh, shit. Well, you know nothing.
Tigers.
Okay,
I had a crush on Karen Havey.
Okay. Well, you went to St Kilda. Do you think the culture at St Kilda will ever be changed? If you read the history called the Hallowed Saints, it goes back to 1930. Or, it goes back. But they're on their way to win a premiership and they shoot themselves in the foot.
I know.
And it just seems to keep on perpetuating. The idiots are still around. They've got this culture and they never seem to get going.
No, I know. It's a great question. And two things come to mind. The first thing is when I reflect on the Saints broadly, I refer to as the great Shakespearean tragedy because no one can explain it to me. And I'll tell you a little story. It only takes 30 seconds. I asked exactly that question to a man I know you admire and I know you have enormous respect for, and I'm talking to the late, great Alan Jeans. And I sat down with Yabby one day and I said, Yabby, what is it about this joint, mate? What is it? And he said, laddie, it's very simple, son. He said, we've traded out more great players because we can't pay our flipping bills. He said, I can promise you this. He said, the culture at St Kilda is no worse than better or worse than the culture at Hawthorn. Quote, unquote.
Lot different, my friend.
Yeah.
Well, you haven't been at the Saints.
Yeah, well, I
But
look from the outside.
Yeah, you look from the outside. That's
Just
right.
the great
And
Alan
I can
Jeans
just
said
say,
that,
look at
Donald.
the success for you mentioned before, and when you were there, I was on the board at Hawthorn, and Geelong and St Kilda had this unbelievable list.
No, I know.
Unbelievable. Both of them. One took stock of themselves, and Geelong went on and had terrific success. And you were there with Geelong as far as
100% we were.
Yet St Kilda never went on.
I can't explain it, and I'll go to my grave satisfied in the knowledge that Alan Jeans couldn't either. And I had...
But they went in Jeans's time. Yes, you're right. They won one premiership. They should have won
Should've
a
won
lot
more.
more,
Yeah.
a lot
71.
more with the talent that they had from about 65 through to about 72.
He was no good,
1971.
Alan.
Yeah,
1971.
71,
My
you know.
favourite. In fact, when I bump into younger people coming into recovery, one of the things I ask them to do is Google John Kennedy, 1971, three-quarter time. Just do something.
No. That was 75.
61, sorry. 61.
Hey, Rod,
Hate it when I get my facts
Don't
wrong.
think,
Right.
just
Ha-
do.
Just do.
You got that fact really
how
wrong.
did you feel when Nick Rewalt publicly berated you on the Footy Show after your interview with Damien Barrett?
Well, number one, I wouldn't call it a public berating.
You wouldn't?
Nah.
He said.
No, I've been berated.
Decisions were made under the influence. I didn't appreciate that part of the interview. He was.
I
thought
don't call that a berating. I mean, I've been on the other end of some beratings, and that wasn't a berating. I mean, no, Nick's has a view, and that's fine. I respect that. You know, Mike, if I go through life being so damned precious that I'm going to be wounded by some criticism,
Speaking
I
of the
do.
right man here.
Worse.
well,
Precious.
mate, my road's going to be long and hard. I'm
No
not
precious, more precious.
Nick's entitled to his view. Let me share this with you.
Righto.
Let me share this. The universe has been around for about 14 billion years. There are nearly 8 billion people on the planet. If I'm going to get upset, now let me put this in another perspective. If the universe has been around 14 years and we drew a timeline, that's a long line, Jesus Christ was here 3 seconds ago, to put it into perspective. Now, 8 billion people on the planet, if I'm going to get upset or annoyed or even whatever over a comment, I mean...
Or embarrassed. You
No.
throw that
I
in.
reckon most of them have got upset over me anyhow.
Or
the 8 billion, yeah.
people, yeah. I'd say I agree with that.
Yeah, anyhow,
I'd,
that's
I'd suggest you get over yourself there, Sam.
He hasn't.
8 billion people is a lot of people. Sam, I just want to answer a question. You asked a very good question straight off the bat, and I didn't answer it, and I want to answer it. Yes, I am regretful for my behaviour and for my addictive behaviour, of which I was in denial and completely unaware. Nonetheless, I have offered to go back to the Saints historically and say, hey guys, I should have done a better job. I am regretful. I was in a position of responsibility to those members in particular who I adore, the Saints members. They're good people and they deserve some success, and I let them down 100%, and I'm regretful for that.
Okay. And that's brave of you to do that.
It is.
And
Just a fact.
unconditional. Now, the other thing I want to ask you is about the drugs. You publicly advocated the decriminalisation of drugs recently.
Correct.
Right? Except you stopped at ICE.
Well, I didn't mean to stop at ICE, Mike, so if that's the way it came across...
Well, it did.
No. I said to the journalist that I spoke to at the time that all drugs, full stop. I did. Now if that's not how it was reported, then that's a little disappointing, and it's disappointing in the context of why I said it. Now most people refer to the war on drugs, but no one knows what the war on drugs is. Can I ask you here, what is the war on drugs? Can anyone tell me what the war on drugs is?
Well, their availability.
No, but the history. Where did it come from? Why do we have it? What's its purpose?
Yeah, but it's been around since Adam was a boy.
It's been around since
a crutch.
1933.
No, but it goes back to...
No, it doesn't.
You can go to South America and get stuff out of the jungle.
Wasn't a war.
Sorry?
Wasn't a war. It wasn't
It's
a
probably
war.
it's probably, Rod, the fact that there's so much of it illicitly taken that the government can't make any money out of it, because it is just the biggest thing in the world is the availability or trying to get drugs, because it's makes you feel good, I presume.
Sure.
And takes you into a different world, and the government can't get 1 cent out of it because
Well, they
it's
could
done illegally.
if they thought mildly laterally, they could. See, the war on drugs started in 1933. And in 1931, I think it was, the Americans lifted the prohibition on alcohol, right?
That's right.
So by lifting the prohibition on alcohol, they wiped out the criminal element. Gone. Because their business was gone. Because it was now legal. And it was being sold legally, and the government was collecting taxes. So, and putting those taxes hopefully back into schools, roads and hospitals. One sec. Now, in 1933, there was a bloke by the name of Harry Aslinger. And he was running the New York Bureau of Narcotics. And quite frankly, Harry shat himself, because Harry wanted a nice big fat department, and because it made him feel good. And so he convinced the government of the day that they needed to start a war. And who will we pick on? We'll pick on the Negroes, we'll pick on the Chinese, and we'll pick on the Mexicans, because they're bringing this white powdery stuff in and polluting the minds of our young white Americans. It was the greatest hoax of all time. So all I'm saying is, if we look at history as being the great teacher with respect to this issue, and we say, you know what, the one thing I know, and I'm not going to ask anyone here whether they're, but I reckon north of 70 people in the Western world, adults, have tried drugs at one point or another. So having some stupid law is in effect, it's not working. So a little bit of counterintuitive thinking, let's legalise the drugs, let's raise 10 or 20 billion dollars of tax a year, let's educate our primary and our secondary children, let's build some rehabilitation centres, let's stop living in denial.
So theoretically that's great. In practice, the logical extension of legalising drugs is what? That people can go out, and if they want to buy Coke, they want to buy ecstasy, they want to
They're doing it now, Sam.
No, but
they're doing it now.
But they do it underhand, and they do it...
in criminal environment.
So if I wanted to go out, if it was legalised, go to a shop and say, I just want a gram of Coke, or however it's sold.
That's right.
However it's sold. Want a gram of Coke, just pay for it and go and use it. You end up having a society full of zombies.
No. Rod's saying that we do anyway.
Yeah.
No, there's 2 points there. One, we're doing it anyway. If you want drugs, you know where to get them. People go and find them. But point two, and I think the most important point is that if you look at countries like Portugal, if you look at 22 of the American states where they have decriminalised,
marijuana.
And other drugs.
Yep, sorry.
No increase in usage.
Okay.
Really important point.
Okay.
Really important point. So if people are going to use, they're going to use, whether it's legal or otherwise. The government needs to get its head out of its backside because we are killing young people. Mm-hmm. We're failing with pill testing. Our attempt to put in a safe injecting room in Richmond is pathetic. I'll give you an example on safe injecting. In Sydney in the year 2000, the state government up there opened up a safe injecting room in Darlinghurst. From 2000 to 2020, let me ask you how many deaths, heroin overdoses in that region? Not one. Not one. Now in the same, not one. And they've resuscitated something in the order of 400,000 overdoses. Now, the important point is some of those people go and get into recovery. They go and get jobs. They pay their taxes. They raise their children. It's functional. It's working. In Melbourne, we only put a safe injecting room in from threat of losing the seat of Northcote, completely botched it. And in that time, from 2000 to 2008, and when we put it in, 1,000 deaths. And that sucks. That's
why is
piss,
the difference?
That's piss weak leadership.
Yeah, but why?
Because you know people are going to try drugs.
No, but why is the difference between Sydney and Melbourne?
Because they did it properly. They did it 20 years ago. They started to get honest about the drug problem. They weren't playing politics. They were playing leadership.
And you can't manage the quality of illicit drugs, can you?
You cannot manage the quality. Do you reckon the criminals who manufacture this crap give a shit about quality? Of course not. No. And do you know how much money leaves our shores, Australian shores, every year going into the bikie gangs, going into the cartels? $10 billion a year.
So, Rod,
what could you do with $10 billion from a mental health perspective?
Have you ever been sought for your advice, either as a political advocate for all this, or are you interested in?
I am very interested, but right at the moment I'm rebuilding a business.
What business is that?
I'm doing a professional services, like a consulting platform. For
I want to.
Consulting into banks, consulting on IT, we're involved in the Future Submarine project.
How are you involved in that?
Well, we've just got some people deployed who are helping in the design phase. Some of our consultants,
Too sharp for us, Mick.
No.
It's pretty generic.
No. I don't know the blunt end of a submarine from the pointy end.
No, but you're an enabler.
I'm an enabler.
You see yourself as an entrepreneur, don't you?
That's what I am.
Now, this has bemused me, Rod. I've got to ask you this.
This
might be apocryphal. Yeah. Did you ever...
Last time you prefaced a question many, many years ago.
Yes.
You prefaced a question. You ended up chanting Hare Krishna with me. You remember that?
Is that when you called? I remember you called me once.
The boogaloo was up your nose.
Yeah, I remember you called me once. You said I couldn't chew gum and walk at the same time.
I didn't say that about you.
Dumb as dog shit. Yes, you did.
Oh, I know.
Rod, one thing we have in common, mate. I can cop plenty of people saying things about me as long as they don't mind. As long as they don't mind what I say about them. I've had this might be apocryphal. Did you ever offer an AFL director at a board meeting to come into the toilets and have a line with you?
No, of course not. No,
I was told that. It made me laugh.
I'm not sure about the company you keep, but
no, that's all right.
No, of course not. No. I was very high functioning. I wouldn't attend a board meeting under the influence of anything other than lust.
How would you say that if you were part of for 6 years the president in St Kilda, you would have to attend a fair number of AFL meetings. How could you possibly say that you weren't?
Don't get on the gear, or you don't get on the booze. You didn't
get on it every day?
No.
But Rewalt said of you that decisions were made while you were under the influence of drugs.
Okay, let me qualify that point because I think it's a good point. It's a very important point to qualify. When I say under the influence, you are an addict or an alcoholic 24/7. Whether you're pissed or otherwise, whether you're high as a kite or otherwise. You might have been sober for 3 days. You're still under the influence of that alcoholic thinking is the point. And I think fair enough too if people drew the conclusion that you racked up and waltzed into the board meeting as high as a kite. But that's not the case. As I said earlier, I identify as an addict, and I am an addict whether I'm sober or not. I am an addict whether I've been on the gear or not. It's my thinking that makes me addictive. And that's why, I made decisions under the influence of being an addict. Certainly not, absolutely not, high as a kite. I mean, quite frankly, the adrenaline rush and the excitement you get out of being involved in AFL at that level is ample, ample. What's the word I'm thinking of? Ample.
That's sufficient.
Adrenaline hit.
Totally.
Yeah.
And your ex-wife, Susie.
Which one? Oh, Susie.
Yes, Susie.
How many? Hey, sorry. Whoa.
Just two.
How many?
Just two.
Geez, we've done well around this table.
Yeah, no. How many
Yeah.
wives
How many?
have you
Just
had of my
two?
own? Yep.
You qualify with two.
Two.
Now, your ex-wife, did you watch her on Real Housewives of Melbourne?
No, I
was
didn't.
You didn't, couldn't.
I didn't.
Couldn't. Bring
Oh, well,
yourself-
I've banned commercial television at home. I really have.
Good decision.
Yeah, and I can't.
Was that a similar show to that Hollywood one?
Yes.
Yes, they're all just,
I just
around
couldn't,
the world.
I couldn't watch it. I mean, I don't watch any commercial television.
Rod-
I rarely listen to commercial radio.
Before you leave, Susie,
Yes.
and I saw you in Wedded Bliss. You're married in February. Now, I raised this at my peril, but you were married in February and done by July.
Yes.
Was a whim, just on a whim.
What happened there?
She told me what she thought of me.
But that's 5 months.
Yeah, I know. It wasn't my greatest achievement. Yeah. I probably wasn't in my best fighting shape.
No, that's a very honest and candid answer. Because to have failed, you can't experience the highs unless you appreciate the lows.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, that's right.
There's a nice
yeah, your box
philosophical
on.
thing to say.
Thank you, Aristotle.
Yeah, I'm almost almost at one with this man.
Hey, you're an honest man. I mean,
The honesty has been
Yeah.
extraordinary.
Well, I
No, it's
don't know.
good.
It's simple. It makes life easy, doesn't it? It really does.
well, sometimes it must hurt, I think, when you've got to own up to sort of deficiencies or mistakes you've made along the way.
It doesn't hurt, Mike, and I'll tell you why it doesn't hurt. From a heartfelt perspective, I'd like to see the world a better place. And if you can't be honest with yourself, for F's sake, what hope have you got?
How do you
Seriously.
get on with your kids?
Like, great relationship.
How many children?
2 that I know of. So my old man was a particularly honest fellow, so I suppose I grew up
was
as
what?
a particularly honest fellow, Dad. So I grew up with that role model, and but I think, as a functioning addict, I was dishonest. Make no mistake, I was selfish, self-centered, dishonest. And then I got sober, and you just let go of that, and you just say, well, I don't need to be dishonest anymore. And if it helps somebody out there say, you know what, I might have had a few problems in this area, and I reckon I wouldn't mind having a little bit of what you got, then the rewards are compelling.
I want you just one quick one from me about your football. You played. You and Tomo were friends from your time at St Kilda with the St Kilda
We were
Reserves,
teammates
correct?
in 75
Yeah.
through 78.
Yeah.
I didn't see him again until 1997 or 8. So we weren't so much friends.
So what made the bond as tight as it was when you got back? With
Oh,
him?
common purpose. Yeah. No, common purpose. We
What,
both wanted to see
fixing
the Saints.
St Kilda?
Yeah.
So was he on the board and asked you to join the board?
We both joined together. He asked me to come and Andrew Plimpton, my predecessor, was open about getting toward the end of
Because
his.
Stuart Trott had left and Jerry
Jerry
Ryan.
had left. Yeah, that's
so
right.
There were
And Andrew
vacancy
was.
for two. So a football
Yeah.
person and a business person similar to
Yeah,
Jerry Ryan.
and Andrew was open about. He was at the end of his thing, and so we had a bit of a. And we joined the board, and I ended up pres, and away we went.
If you were firmer with Tomo, if you hadn't had that friendship and you weren't mates, could Tomo have been the coach that St Kilda needed? Did he just need some direction and some control?
As I said earlier, Tomo's great strength is his single-mindedness of purpose, and it's also his great weakness. So, there was no sort of, hey, what do you reckon about this, mate? It was, And it was a great strength, but often our great strengths are our undoing.
Well, I remember, Sam, you asked Tomo a question in a previous forum that you and I did about Gold Coast, and Sam said, would you go there?
To the coach.
And he said, I'd go there only if I was the Supremo, if I was the coach, the CEO, the president, the recruiting man. Remember that?
Yep,
he said he would do it all only under those conditions.
Yep. Yes.
Yeah.
And it doesn't work.
I was just going to say, that's impossible.
Of course.
Now
you know what we were dealing with.
Now, Rod.
Unbelievable. But I can't understand how you let it get that far anyway. He must have been very conniving.
No, I'm not going to label him with. He was an AFL coach who was suffering the pressures of an AFL coach.
Oh, mate, come on. You don't. Your job is to coach, is not to run the football club.
No, well, I mean, he did very well on that one.
Now, Rod,
yes, Sam?
Your public persona, you've probably been maligned by the public for the perception they have of you, but I think this is probably as about a refreshing chat as I've had with
You're
someone...
not going to make me gush, are you?
No, who's been man enough to apologise for his indiscretions and has no problem about facing whoever he has to face, and I've found it fantastic to speak to you. I'm not saying you're a great person or you're not a great person. I'm just saying it's been very refreshing and open to have someone like you speak to us, I think. Do you agree with that?
Oh, no, totally, yeah.
And isn't it interesting that you get an image of somebody or people talk within this small world of Melbourne and you form an image of somebody?
I just said that, Donald. His public persona...
I'm confirming
his public persona, he is maligned publicly because people have a perception of him.
Show. I shouldn't have said anything.
You should have, Donald, please. And thank you so much for coming in.
A great pleasure.
We wish you well.
Thank you very much, Sam. It was a great pleasure. I did have lunch recently with a business lunch, and the guy said, he said, Rod, I've met you 3 or 4 times now. He said, you need a new PR agent. Because I don't know what people think, but they think...
Well, they think you're an idiot.
Oh, there you go.
No, they don't think you're an idiot.
But I've got living...
Well, no,
but Don, I've got an official document at home that confirms the fact that I'm a bloody idiot.
No, they don't think you're an idiot.
I'm using that loosely.
Yes, and I took it that way.
Yes, thank you very much.
Yeah.
There was no offence meant.
Well, you're not an idiot.
Precious.
What's that?
He's precious. Are you getting precious now? He's not.
You're making me precious, Donald. You're making me wondering why I ever actually do spend any time with you.
You don't.
I think if you benchmarks Einstein, you're in deep shit.
He was an idiot.
Thank you, Rod. Thanks for coming in, mate.
Righto, well, we're going out now with Daddy Cool. Come back again.